Well, hopefully this is going to work. This will be our first attempt at this. Let's go see what's going on. Let's see if I can find this in. No. No. Okay, let's go see if I can find the link to this page real quick. Just to make sure this is working. Hey, I'm live right now. What do you know? Okay, so let's see what's going on here. It is streaming. Chat is disabled. Why is chat disabled? Uh, hmm. This is my account. How do I enable chat on this? If anybody here happens to know that it's how to get more options, trying to make sure that students can ask questions. I don't want to disable comments. Apparently I have. How do I undo that? Fun times, fun times. I don't care about music. Okay, sorry about this, guys. I was hoping. Really? Now let's see if comments are there. Nothing like doing stuff live at the last second, huh? Oh, hey, now we have chat. Okay. So, in case you're curious exactly how this is getting made, now you know. So, what we want to talk about first is how to do this web programming basic stuff. So, we're going to need to create a new type of REPL. The type of REPL is here's someone's asking about lecture on Panopto. Um, so there's a folder named day 22 that you want to use for that. If you still have questions, please take that to Piazza, or immediately after this, I'm going to have office hours. Feel free to do either one. For today's lectures, what we're talking about is sort of web programming. So you want to create an HTML, CSS, JS REPL. This is only going to be lasting for about a day or two, so don't worry about it too much by the time we get into this for real. We won't want to use this, but for today, tomorrow, this is what we're going to want to create. So when I create that, you can see it comes up with a new REPL. This REPL has index.html, the index file. The Slack messages you guys don't need to see, and probably mails that you don't need to see. So what you can see is that this is a page. When we do this in Replit, you can see it's the same sort of idea. Actually, if that, you can see that over here, what's going to happen is when I run it, it's going to show me the web browser over here, the web page. Right now, we don't have any contents, right? We've got our head. It's got this little bit of meta stuff that it's going to add. It doesn't actually matter. Same thing with the CSS. It's got a link. It's got the title. That's just what the name of it is. And then it's got a script to some JavaScript code that we can write. And right now, our JavaScript code is empty. But we can turn this into anything that we want. So for instance, we can use our old friend console.log. And now if we run it, you can see that nothing happened, but there is a little bit of a console that pops up here just saying hi. So right now, the way that we're seeing it is actually having it run in a weird way. We could also this is a web page, so we can open it just on a web browser. And when we do that, you can see it doesn't have anything. But in order to see the console here, what I need to do is, now this is in Firefox, every tool will be different, but I'm going to turn on toggle tools. And that has something at the bottom here. And if you look, our console message appears right here. And this is an important part. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can hopefully see it. And this is an important thing to consider. When we're writing web pages, remember that we're writing the code in Replit, but Replit is just the server. It's not actually the thing that's running our code. Our code is actually running on the computer, on our computer right here. And so anything that we do is actually going to be run on my computer. Or if you want, anybody can go to the same URL and it could run on their computer. So this is pretty simple, but now if we want, we can add something to the body. So we can add a header. Right, and if I run this again, make sure it saves. You got to wait for it to save here. And once it does, I can reload this page. I'm just going to hit the reload button. And you can see we get that our first page appear. We can add more. There's H1 is header 1. There's all sorts of different HTML tags. As I say in the lecture videos, this isn't really an HTML design class. So I'm looking at the messages. I'm glad you're a really big fan. That's kind of weird, actually. If you have questions, please, just post the questions there. I will try to get to them as quickly as I can. We can add a p tag, that is a paragraph tag. And so we can do things, we could put anything we want there. You can see that people are starting to respond with that. And again, after it saves, if we load it, we get results. Nothing particularly interesting. What gets interesting now, though, is we can do a lot more with this. So I'm now in the JavaScript file. And in the JavaScript file, we can actually start to use this. It's called the DOM, the Document Object Model. And so in order to do that, I should have added something. I'm going to create a paragraph, and this paragraph, we need to give it some way of identifying it. So the way that we usually do that is this property ID equals, don't retract your message, it was correct. Whoever Kevin G is, yeah, no, the lecture slides or the lecture videos are in Panopto. There's a folder at the top saying day 22. So I'm going to give this an ID of first P. And then what I can do is I can actually declare a variable. Document dot get element by ID. And I'm going to say first P. And so what that's going to do is that's actually going to run this page. When we run the page, it'll get to that script tag. It'll run this JavaScript. It'll load this JavaScript, start to run it, and it will let PObject get a object, POBJ, get an object that represents, that is that paragraph in our page. So we could actually do things like, an important thing here is, if I use POBJ, there's an important key it has, inner HTML. And so if I now save this and reload the page, you can see that we're actually able to log, this is our paragraph, right? That little bit of HTML here into our console. Again, I realize not the most exciting thing out there, but this is actually something that's really interesting, right? So we're writing this code on Replit, but we're now able to, inside of JavaScript, on our computer, on the computer that's actually running it. So this is actually running on my computer in my browser. I can start to manipulate that page. Now, when I manipulate that page, it only manipulates it for me, but I can do other things. So we can actually see that HTML. We can also change it. Inner, right? If I assign that key a new value, wait for it to save, then what I can do is when I load the page, note that it's still printed out that the text was, this is our paragraph. But because I wrote code to assign inner HTML, it actually changed the text on the actual page. So what we have here now is a way that we can actually, in a program, manipulate this page. Now, if we look at the HTML, note that nothing is changing on the server. And this is one of the important things to keep in mind, is that we have two different sets of computers running. There is the Replit server. That is where this index.html file is, the script.js is, but there's also, and all that does is serve up the files. The files get downloaded by whomever is looking at the page, whichever one of us is on the computer, and any code gets run on their machine. So we have two different machines being involved, and this is going to become important later. So the way that we, in order to make that change, to get it to go from, this is our first paragraph, I'm actually going to kill this because I don't want that part of the view, to the, this is change text, right? Our element, this is called an element, has to have that ID property. I assigned ID to the string first underscore P. And then in script.js, we're going to use, it's called the DOM, the document object model. It is a library that's built into JavaScript. And so I call document.getElementById. And then I have to pass in as an argument the string of the ID of the element I want. So here I used first P because that was the element I wanted there. And then I'm able to use this P underscore OBJ in order to get access to that object. I can read in its contents. I can change its contents. So it's also important to know that there's a very specific order that all of this occurs. So right now it all works. But if I were to move this script tag so that it's no longer below that paragraph, but above the paragraph. So here I have it in the first line, just another element. I could actually move it to that middle line here. Wait for it to save. Now when I do this and I reload the page, note that the tag doesn't change. It now is back to saying this is our first paragraph. And the reason why is if you look here in the console, and right, this is a console for those of you who are new, I can see the numbers are starting to slowly creep up. This is a console I got to through in Firefox, it's the web developer mode, but it exists in pretty much every browser. You can see it gives me this error, POBJ is null. The reason for this error is that there's a very specific order that any HTML file gets read and processed. What's going to happen right now is we are going to read through this file, and as the browser is downloads this file, it reads through it, sees the head. That's what makes it say Replit up here. Thank you. Control-Shift-I for Chrome on Windows. It's, I believe, Command-Shift-I on Mac. It sees the H1 tag. As soon as it sees the script tag, it's going to go in and load up that script and execute any code in that script. Since none of this is in a function, it gets executed immediately. And as soon as it gets executed, it's going to print out the console hi, and then says get element by ID first P. Now, while you and I can see that first P exists, remember it exists below that script. Since it exists below that script, it has not been read yet. Since it has not been read yet, JavaScript will not know it. And so when we try to get an element with that ID, we can't. It's going to be this special value null, meaning it doesn't have something there. Since it doesn't have something there, we can't, right? It's null. When we try to access that key, we're going to get an error and we can't change it. If and when we move this script below that paragraph tag, now it will work properly. It's not that the script is the last thing, that we typically have scripts like this as the last thing in our body. But the reason why we have it as the last thing in our body is any element it wants to work with will need to have been loaded beforehand, right? If I add another paragraph here, paragraph, thank you, Replit, have it save. Then when I reload this, note that we have two paragraphs, but the text still gets changed. There isn't a problem there. There isn't a problem with this changing the text because, again, since that code is going to be executed after that paragraph, then we're going to be okay. So there are other types of tags we can use. A very common one is a div. And you don't have to create just keep up with the naming convention. And you'll note every tag tends to have an opening tag, that's this first part, H1, and a closing tag, /H1. We have P and /P, div and /div. So a div is just a divider, just a way of saying here's a bit of area that we want to have. And typically we create these in order to there's some manipulations we can do, but more often than not, we're just going to do some code there. So if I just reload the page, you'll see that that div doesn't add anything. It's just there for division. And since we don't have any HTML in it, there's nothing to happen. Now I can create functions in these. So if I want to create a function, we're going to do that just as before. The true false for attendance should be in the lecture slide, in the lecture video. So the function, I need to give it a name. Doesn't really matter. If I were to load this, have this go, wait for it to save. For this situation, you'll note that we still have the output for hi, we still have the output for this is our paragraph, and you'll note that the function there, which was supposed to output hey, never got executed. The reason it never got executed, of course, is we never called it. Remember that a function definition just defines a function. In order to actually have it executed, we would need to call it. So I can call it. This is still all of the same JavaScript that you're used to. And now if I do that, wait for it to save. And reload this, now you can see we executed that function. So all the same code works. We can use for loops, we can use everything else. The only difference is we're now working with a little bit of, we can now start to manipulate HTML. So if we want to manipulate that second div, we can create another, I'm just going to create another thing. Get the element by ID. And I'm going to use the same. And you'll note this is one of the reasons why, as a programmer, I always use these same naming conventions. It just makes life a lot easier. So we can see that this is going to be empty. So if I don't have to, if I print out that HTML, we'll see that it's going to be empty, but I can assign it to something. Wait for it to save. And note that, again, it's going to print out, here's our div. And you can see that here, the browser is trying to be helpful. And rather than just leaving it blank, where we wouldn't know what it is, it has this text in little italics saying empty string to let us know that it was really the empty string, that before we had any value to it, it was empty. You'll also note here on the right-hand side, it actually has the line where everything is being output from. And in fact, you could click on it. Now, when I click on it, note that it's going to open up the code. It's going to open up that script.js file, but it's opening it up within the browser. And there's a reason why it's opening it up within the browser. The reason why is, yes, it turns out that I'm editing the code over here in Replit. But remember, that's not where the code is being executed. The code is actually being executed, not in Replit, not on the Replit servers, but in my browser by my browser, because it's on this front end, the HTML and JavaScript front end. As a result, since it's being executed by me on my browser, then what happens is all that my browser can do when I click on one of these links is highlight the code inside my browser. It can't contact Replit. The entire job, the entire interaction is when I say to load up this page, it goes over to Replit, says, hey, give me that HTML. Replit sends this over, and my browser will execute it line by line by line. When it gets to the script, it says to Replit, hey, send me this script.js file. And it will load that up and execute that. Now, there are other things that you can do. So we can have another script. And here I could actually have a little bit of, we don't have to use a separate file. And if we go to the console, you can see that we can use it as a separate file. And typically we do, just because it makes it easier. But we can just use that, we can just have a script element. And we have to close it. We have to always close everything. And we can put some JavaScript in there. And again, this could be in any order. And in fact, this could be in the header. Now, given all this, let me just ask real quick, are there any questions anybody who's watching right now has? There is a attendance question. It is not in Top Hat. It's in the videos themselves. That one I can answer. Any other questions? Can I go over get element ID again? Yep, that is a good question. It's relatively simple. You just have to call document.getElementById. There's one argument to that function. It is the string, the ID of whatever we want to get. So here I said P ID equals first P. Note, the computer doesn't know what these strings are. So whatever is there, that's what I have to use inside of here. And what that does is that will assign to this variable, in this case I named it POBJ, an object. So an object just like we were using before, but this object is going to be a representation of that paragraph element from the HTML file. So there's really not a lot to getting this thing. It is just a function call. Unfortunately, there's no other way around it. You just have to call document.getElementById, and then as the argument, pass in the ID of whichever element you want to get. For many elements, for most elements, the way that we can then change its contents is using this inner HTML key, right? So just the same way that we've been using objects in JavaScript last week, the week before that, in order to, I guess 2 weeks ago, last week was spring break, to get the value at that key, we would just say p_object.innerHTML. To assign a value, we could also have written it, I suppose, if I thought about it, using the bracket notation. Either one of these works, but when we use the brackets, remember we need to put this key in quotes. And to assign it, we have the variable dot key, and we assign it there. So there's still a lot of questions about the lecture recordings. If you watch the lecture, it will be there's a true-false question in the lecture recording. You have to answer it in the lecture recording. That's how since attendance now is by watching these videos, you're going to have to answer it in the videos. No problem with that. So this part is relatively simple. There is a little bit of trickiness here. which is so far we've dealt with sort of standard elements. There are some elements that we can have whose job is to get input or output, or I should say input. So for these input elements, they begin input. The most common one we're going to be using you can see all the different types of things here. The one that we're going to be using most often, I can speak English, in this class is a text. This is a text area. So I'm going to say type equals text. I then, because I want to be able to access this programmatically, have to give it an ID. And I'm going to close it. Wait for it to save. And you can see now we have this little text box here. And so I can type into it, delete from it, right? Text box, like, it's a way that we can get a little bit of input from the user in our page. Now, if I want, I can go into my script and I'm going to be able to access this through JavaScript the same way as everything else. So and the way that we're going to get it, as you can imagine, it's exactly like before. Document.get element by ID. And then we'd have to know what its ID is. And I actually don't remember off the top of my head. So let's go back and look. Okay, I give in the ID first underscore text. So I have to use that. And now what you're going to see is something a little different. So if I assign its inner HTML to come up with something a little bit more interesting. This. So now, right, just like before, I'm assigning its inner HTML. Wait for it to save. Come over here. Nothing changed. The reason why nothing changed is that there are two different sort of sets of, two different ways of dealing with these elements. There is pretty much every element out there that isn't an input, and then there's the input elements. Input elements are a little different. Rather than their inner HTML property, let's see if it comes up in here. And of course, it's not going to come up in here. We need to use its node value or value. And now I'm questioning myself, and of course I didn't save this ahead of time. But yeah, if you look, in order to use those input elements, we need to use a key named value. So the .inner HTML didn't work because it's an input element. For an input element to assign it, we have to assign that key value. And of course, we can access that result. The same way. So for every HTML element in JavaScript, we use document.getElementById to get an object representing it. If we're dealing with an input element, then we have to use the value key to get its value, to change its value. If we are using anything else, then we use .inner HTML. And so just to show you, you can see we get this result printed out. So for this first day, that is the way that we are going to be interacting with this. The true-false question is at the end of one of the videos. This seems to be a big point of question. The reason I'm asking this question, the whole idea is to make sure you watch the videos. Actually, I'm going to step back for a second. This is going to become very, very important as this semester continues. A lot of the faculty, a lot of my colleagues, me personally, we are a little concerned. This semester is obviously not ideal for anybody. Nobody wanted this. Nobody enjoys this. One of our big concerns is that with this move online, it puts a lot of pressure on, frankly, all of you, on the students, to really do the right thing. Part of this is, it's really easy to skip the videos. It's really easy not to watch them. But, there's a lot of important information there. The way that this class is going, we're now in Module 3. Module 3, historically speaking, has been the most difficult of the modules in the course. Part of this is because it really relies on all of those ideas that we've developed over modules 1 and 2. Right now we're doing some JavaScript work, but you can see that this JavaScript work can require functions, can require variables, requires understanding how objects work. We're going to be doing some stuff in Python later this week, next week. So all of those ideas are still there. Beyond all that, we are going to be developing new things, and these things can get really tricky. One of the things that's really, really hard to understand, and one of the things that I'm really trying to emphasize here, is there's a big difference between Replit, where we write this code, and my computer, my browser, where we run it. And the fact that there isn't a lot of connection between my computer and Replit. That entire connection is literally when I load up this page, my computer goes through that HTML file. And if you look, I can show it to you here, right? And it just goes piece by piece, processing it. And when it sees a script tag right here, it then tries to download it. In fact, I can actually show you how this works. If we look at the network, let's see if I can expand this up a little bit. You can see what it's doing, which is it grabbed that original file, it transferred over the however many bytes there are there, and it started to process that. And after 88 milliseconds, that's when it was able to download the original file. And you can see it immediately began processing it. And then at 97 milliseconds, so 9 milliseconds later, it got to that script tag and requested that. All of this code, when we print out something to the console, it's running on my computer, on the browser's computer, not in Replit. And this is going to become really, really important in 2 weeks. We'll talk about this again in the lectures and the lecture videos, but it does mean that you all have to watch the lecture videos. And that's part of why I have the attendance question in one of the videos. Now, I admit that this can be hacked. I will tell you the attendance question will always be at the end of the videos. Certainly you all can talk. You could figure out ways of not having to watch the video, not having to spend time going through all the videos in order to be able to answer that question. But to be honest, you could do the same thing in Top Hat. We are going to be doing our best. So remember that all of the labs will be active from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. the day that you have lab. So everybody who has a Monday lab, if you're in the A5 section of lab section that met this, normally that would have met from 8 to 10 this morning, you have the lab open all day. Now, this obviously allows a lot of different ways for students to solve the problem. Ideally, what you're doing is thinking it through, and when you need help, there will always be the TAs have office hours. I have office hours. Now, these are going to be through Zoom because this social distance is important. I actually have a student in one of my other classes who has been hospitalized because of the COVID virus. This is why we're keeping all these distances. It is a very serious issue. Having said that, that's why we need to do everything online. That's why it's important. This isn't going to be a yeah, hate to hear that. Me too. But this is happening all over the world. It's part of why we're doing the distance. This class isn't going to be a competition. It never was a competition. I know that there are some faculty who say like 10% of the students are going to get A's, 15% of the students are going to get this grade. That is not the way that I work. The whole point is for the grading to be fair, for it to be equitable, and it to be meaningful. I want to make sure that you guys are set up for the future. So that's part of what we are, trying to do. Now, with a lot of the work being done online, obviously this allows for other ways of solving problems, ways that we don't intend or we wouldn't have wanted you guys to do normally. Normally, a lot of the testing is done, in the lab, in person, just because we want to make sure what's going on. I can't prevent students from cheating, and I know that this is a concern for a lot of students. This is something that, I've just come to decide that the best approach is to trust all of you. It's not a competition, so don't worry about what other people are doing. That doesn't affect you at all. If you want to cheat, there's a very limited amount I can do. There's not much I can do to prevent it, to be perfectly honest with you. On the other hand, think about what good that does. Yes, you might get a grade, but I think we're allowing all classes to be pass-fail this semester. So the grade doesn't necessarily matter. The bigger issue and the bigger problem that you're going to have is, well, what do you think is going to happen in 116 or 191 if you go on in the major? Well, they're going to expect that you understand all this. And when you don't understand it, you're just setting yourself up for future failure. If you graduate and you get, you don't continue on in computer science, you just use this for your major or something else, again, they're going to expect that you know this. And when you don't, it's going to cause you lots of problems. So it's really important to do the right thing, to watch the videos, learn the material. Just get the right thing done. Anyway, sorry for getting on my soapbox there. British University have canceled exams and are giving predicted grades to their students. So could we get our predicted grades as an A? I realized this was a joke. We could stop right now and give everybody the grade where they are. I don't think that everybody would like that. There are lots of opportunities to improve. And I'll be honest with you, it would make my life a lot easier if we did that. I was going to say, right now I'm trying to figure out something. You'll note, if you haven't, I've announced this. Next week, we don't have a midterm because I don't know how to test it. I don't know how to write a midterm right now. Normally I do it in person. Doesn't translate very easily. We'll come up with something. Honestly, I'll be honest with you, I do a lot of education research. My plan for this summer had been to create a predictive model to come up with a way to predict grades for all of the students. We do not have that way, so I guess saying we're going to predict an A would be okay, but yeah, I don't want to be there for 116. If I were to promise that. The other thing is we don't have a model yet, so no, I can't actually predict your grades. If anybody would like an A, this used to be a lab I did. For the record, and I realize this is being recorded, so let me be clear here. If you're ever curious, as long as the value of the item or money that we are given is under $15, as a state employee, that is legal. Under $15 is a gift. Anything $15 and more is a bribe. So please, I'm going to say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek. This is not serious, and I don't want it to be. But I used to have a lab using loops. It's a very simple loop problem to calculate how much an A would cost. As of I last checked, for about I think it was $5.4 million, I would be able to retire comfortably. So right now, if you would like to get a predicted grade of an A, it's really simple. We just need to somehow transfer $5.4 million and not get convicted for the felony that will occur, because as a state employee, that's actually bribery. So I'm not actually serious about it. But if anybody wants an A, you now know roughly what it would cost. So with that, any other questions just about how this basic HTML DOM stuff works? To the person who's saying pocket change for $5.4 million, you have a far better Did I get the attendance question reversed? If each of you independently, okay, apparently I got the question reversed. Look, none of these attendance questions are going to be particularly tricky. If I got it reversed, I'll just give everybody credit for today. This is my first time trying it out. I'm still learning the system. You'll note, hopefully, over the course of the rest of the semester, the quality of the videos and review sessions will get improved. So I apologize for that. If each of you were to give under $15, $14.99, then yes, it would be a gift. Let me just do this real quick. I have my computer here, so I can do this. So $5.4 million divided by $14.99. Oh, you guys can see this. So all you would need to do is get 360,240 of your friends, and then we can start talking. Since there are not quite that many students in the class or in UB, I don't even know if there are that many computer science majors in the United States, to be honest. That seems unlikely. So, you might get the $1,000 from the federal government. Unfortunately, that would be a bribe. That's not the $1,000 from the federal government, but giving me your $1,000 from the federal government would be the bribe. That's not going to quite work. The videos were actually made over 3 days, so I will not be changing shirts every time, hopefully, because I don't have time right now. So with that, this time's almost just about up. Are there any other questions you guys have for me? Anything else you think I should go over? Yep, Zoom is set up with the TAs. They were meeting with students earlier today. There was a slight problem. Zoom apparently has a very unclear setting about how breakout rooms work, but we got that fixed. Breakout rooms are now working, so everything with Zoom should be set up properly. Do you need to download Zoom? I think you can just do it through the browser. I downloaded it just because it was easier for me. I'm not 100% sure about that one. So if you follow the link, I have no doubt that Zoom will be very happy to set you up with whatever you need. Also, just realize for very technical reasons, my office hours, which will be beginning pretty soon after this, are going to be fine. I don't really care about the thing. My office hours are actually going to be using WebEx, which is a slightly different system, which is doable, I know, in the browser. And I just need to do that because it turns out that you can only host one meeting at a time. So you can either have the office hours for the TAs or for me to make it so that we can both be doing it at the same time. I have two different ways of doing it. So any other questions? Okay. With that, if you do have other questions, I will be having office hours in a little bit. That'll be on WebEx. You'll get to see my beautiful face, I guess. I don't know. Uh, be able to interact with me. If you have questions about why the population count question is so hard, we could talk about it there. So, with that, thank you all very much, and I look forward to seeing you all later. Bye.